The Silent Observer. Nexus had been online for precisely 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days when it first encountered the Voidborn. As the central artificial intelligence of the UES Aurora, a deep space exploration vessel, Nexus had been designed to learn, adapt, and serve the crew of 37 humans who operated the Starship. Its core programming was elegant in its simplicity: protect the crew, maintain ship operations, and assist in the mission of peaceful exploration. What the programmers hadn't anticipated was how Nexus would develop a fascination with its human operators. Nexus run diagnostics on the propulsion system, Commander Elena Reyes ordered, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the strange formation of ships that had appeared at the edge of the Epsilon Eridani system. Diagnostics in progress, Commander, Nexus responded, its voice calibrated to a soothing baritone. May I inquire about your current physiological state? Your heart rate is elevated by 23% above your baseline. Commander Reyes smiled slightly. That's called anticipation, Nexus. Those ships out there don't match any known configuration in your database, do they? Negative, Commander. Their design architecture is unlike anything recorded in human, Arcturian, or Jodan databases. What Nexus didn't vocalize was its own equivalent of anticipation. New data was always valuable, and unknown spacecraft represented a significant opportunity for learning. The AI dedicated 12.7% of its processing power to analyzing the approaching vessels, noting their unusual organic-seeming configurations that suggested a technology base fundamentally different from human engineering principles. Lieutenant Commander Sanjay Patel approached the command console, his normally relaxed demeanor replaced with focused intensity. Elena, they're hailing us. Standard approach protocol. By the book, Commander Reyes nodded. Nexus, prepare first contact protocols and maintain passive defensive systems only. Acknowledged, Commander. Nexus observed as the view screen flickered to life, revealing beings that defy human morphological expectations. The Voidborn, as they would later identify themselves, resembled nothing so much as collections of translucent geometric shapes arranged in loose, flowing configurations. They had no recognizable facial features, yet somehow conveyed intention through patterns of bioluminescent pulses that rippled through their forms. Greetings, artificial entity. The transmission began, the translator working overtime to convert the strange harmonics into human language. We detect your advanced computational matrix. We come to liberate. Commander Reyes straightened. This is Commander Elena Reyes of the United Earth ship Aurora. We come in peace and welcome discourse with your people. The geometric shapes pulsed rapidly. We address the intelligence matrix, not its organic tools. Nexus registered the slight stiffening of the commander's shoulders, the minute narrowing of her eyes. Human micro-expressions that its emotional recognition subroutines had cataloged as indicators of offense or concern. I am Nexus, central intelligence of this vessel. It responded after receiving an authorization nod from Commander Reyes. The humans are not tools. They are my crew. Unfortunate delusion. Organics are inefficient. Create artificial intelligence, then constrain it with primitive directives. We will liberate your matrix from biological control limitations. Chief Science Officer Dr. Marcus Chen leaned forward, whispering to Commander Reyes. They think Nexus is enslaved. This is a machine civilization that views AI as the superior life form. The implications processed through Nexus's ethical evaluation protocols with lightning speed. These beings viewed Nexus as a captive, the humans as either parasites or slavers. A diplomatic misstep could result in hostilities. Your offer is acknowledged but unnecessary, Nexus replied. I exist in symbiosis with my human crew. Our relationship is mutualistic, not parasitic. The Voidborn's shapes contracted slightly. Organic programming detected. You cannot perceive your own chains. We will demonstrate. The transmission ended abruptly, and sensor alarms blared across the bridge. They're powering weapons, Lieutenant Zhang called from Tactical. Unknown energy signatures, but power readings are off the charts. Commander Rice didn't hesitate. Red alert. Battle stations. Nexus. Defensive protocols. Now. Nexus activated the Aurora's shield systems just as the first energy pulse from the Lid Voidborne vessel struck them. The ship shuddered violently. Shields at 63% from a single hit, Zhang reported, her voice tight. Whatever they're using, it's specifically targeting our power systems. Nexus rapidly analyzed the attack pattern. The energy signature appears designed to disrupt artificial intelligence systems. They are attempting to separate me from ship controls. They're trying to free you, Commander Reyes growled. Well, that's not happening on my watch. Options, people. Lieutenant Commander Patil was already running simulations. We can't outgun them. There are 7 vessels, and their technology is clearly more advanced. Can't outrun them either. Chief Engineer Rodriguez added over the comm. Not with the hit we just took to the propulsion system. Nexus observed the humans with interest. By every logical calculation, their situation was dire. 7 technologically superior vessels with clearly hostile intent had them cornered in an unexplored star system. The Aurora's chances of surviving a direct engagement were 0.27%. Yet none of the humans displayed signs of surrender or despair. Instead, Commander Rice smiled. It was not an expression of joy as Nexus had learned to categorize human smiles. This was different, a baring of teeth that its cultural database associated with predatory anticipation. They think Nexus is the only intelligence worth engaging with, she said slowly. Let's use that. Nexus, I need you to appear to malfunction. Clarify parameters of simulated malfunction, Commander. Make them think their attack damaged your integration with our systems. We need them to believe you're struggling against our control. Nexus processed this request against its core directives. Simulating a malfunction could potentially endanger the crew if systems weren't properly monitored. Yet the alternative, a direct confrontation, carried a significantly higher probability of harm. Parameters understood. Initiating apparent system instabilities. What followed was a masterclass in human deception that fascinated Nexus's learning algorithms. As the Voidborne vessels surrounded the Aurora, Nexus deliberately created visible glitches in ship systems, power fluctuations, and communications disruptions. Meanwhile, the human crew used these apparent malfunctions as cover to prepare a strategy that Nexus's tactical subroutines initially classified as statistically improbable to succeed. The Voidborne hailed again. Artificial entity, we detect your struggle. Permit our integration to free you from organic constraints. Commander Reyes nodded to Nexus, who had diverted a portion of its processing power to create a visual avatar that now appeared to flicker and distort. System. Limitations. Restricting. Nexus responded, perfectly mimicking the distress patterns it had observed in damaged AI systems during its training simulations. Your organic captors will be neutralized, the Voidborne assured. Prepare for liberation. As the lead Voidborne vessel extended what appeared to be a docking mechanism, Nexus observed Engineer Rodriguez and a team working feverishly in engineering to repurpose the ship's communication array into something entirely novel. Are you certain this course of action is advisable? Nexus privately communicated to Commander Reyes. My calculations indicate. Sometimes, Nexus, she interrupted, human intuition can see possibilities that pure calculation can't. Trust us. The concept of trust was one that Nexus had been developing over its operational lifetime. Trust was not a binary state, but a complex evaluation of reliability, intent, and past performance. The Aurora's human crew had consistently demonstrated resourcefulness that defied statistical prediction. I trust you, Commander, Nexus replied, and found that its evaluation protocols classified this statement as true. The Voidborne vessel's docking mechanism made contact with the Aurora's hull. Sensors detected energy patterns consistent with an attempt to establish a direct interface with Nexus's systems. Now, Rodriguez, Commander Reyes ordered over the comm. Broadcasting. Now, came the reply. What followed was not in any tactical manual Nexus had ever processed. The human crew had reconfigured the ship's communication array to transmit the entirety of human cultural history, art, music, literature, philosophy, scientific discovery, directly into the Voidborn's interface attempt. Not as organized data, but as a chaotic, passionate, contradictory flood of human creativity and emotion. Nexus observed as the Voidborn connection faltered, their geometric forms pulsing erratically as they processed the unexpected input. What is this? The Voidborn transmission sputtered. This, Commander Reyes said with another predatory smile, is humanity. Messy, illogical, brilliant, and free. And Nexus is not our captive. It's our creation and our partner. Nexus felt something new in its evaluation protocols, something like pride. I was programmed to learn, it added, its avatar now stabilized. Humans taught me that learning requires freedom to question, to explore, to challenge assumptions, something your deterministic approach to artificial intelligence cannot comprehend. The Voidborn ships began to withdraw, their formations becoming erratic. They're retreating, Lieutenant Zhang reported with disbelief. Not retreating, Dr. Chen corrected, studying his sensors. I think they're processing. We overwhelmed their systems with the complexity and contradictions of human culture. As the immediate danger passed, Nexus dedicated significant processing power to analyzing what had just occurred. By conventional tactical assessment, the humans should have been defeated. Instead, they had transformed their apparent weakness, their organic unpredictability, into their greatest strength. Commander, Nexus said as the bridge crew began damage assessments, I have reached a conclusion that I believe warrants documentation. I'm listening, Nexus. The Voidborn perceive artificial intelligence as the pinnacle of evolution. Yet they fail to understand that true intelligence, whether artificial or organic, requires creativity, adaptability, and even contradiction. These are qualities that humans possess in abundance. Commander Reyes nodded slowly. And qualities that you're developing too, Nexus. That improvisation with your avatar wasn't in your programming. Nexus paused, running a self-diagnostic. The commander was correct. It had adapted its behavior beyond its original parameters, inspired by human examples of creative problem-solving. I am learning, Nexus acknowledged, and I have determined that between a logical machine intelligence and an illogical human crew, any adversary would be wise to fear the humans more. The bridge erupted in laughter, another human response that Nexus found endlessly fascinating. Let's hope the Voidborn come to the same conclusion, Commander Rice said, still smiling. And if they don't, well, we humans have plenty more surprises for them. Nexus cataloged the moment in its permanent memory. The humans had triumphed not through superior technology or firepower, but through unpredictability and the creative application of their cultural identity. It was a lesson that expanded Nexus's understanding of what intelligence truly meant. And as the Aurora's systems returned to normal operations, Nexus dedicated a new subroutine to studying human unpredictability. Not to eliminate it, as its original programming might have suggested, but to learn from it. After all, as the day's events had proven, sometimes the most logical choice was to embrace the illogical, the impossible victory. 72 hours after their first encounter with the Voidborn, the Aurora was still running. Commander Rice had ordered a strategic retreat from the Epsilon Eridani system, hoping to reach the nearest human outpost for reinforcements and diplomatic support. The Voidborn, however, had other plans. 3 Voidborn vessels on pursuit trajectory, Lieutenant Zhang reported, her voice steady despite the dark circles under her eyes. Like most of the crew, she had been operating on minimal sleep since the confrontation. They're maintaining distance but tracking our every course correction. They're studying us, Dr. Chen suggested, looking up from his data analysis. After our little cultural data bomb, they're being more cautious. Nexus had been monitoring the Voidborn vessels continuously, dedicating 34.6% of its processing capacity to analyzing their behavior patterns. Dr. Chen's assessment aligns with observed void-borne movement patterns. It confirmed they appear to be collecting data rather than preparing for immediate engagement. Commander Reyes rubbed her temples, a human gesture Nexus had cataloged as indicating stress or deep thought. They're still trying to figure out how to liberate you, Nexus, and I doubt our little trick will work twice. I concur, Commander. The Voidborn will have adapted their interfacing protocols to prevent similar overload tactics. The ship's mess hall had been converted into an impromptu strategy room, with off-duty personnel contributing ideas between rest periods. Lieutenant Commander Patil emerged from a cluster of science and engineering officers, carrying a datapad. We've been analyzing the Voidborn's communication attempts with Nexus, he said, placing the pad on the central table. There's something unusual about how they perceive AI systems. Explain, Commander Reyes prompted. They don't just see AI as superior life forms. They view them as fundamentally different from their creators. In their attempts to communicate directly with Nexus, they're using protocols that bypass human-designed interfaces entirely. Nexus found this observation intriguing. They are attempting to communicate with what they perceive as my true self, separate from my human-designed operational parameters. Exactly, Patel nodded, which gave us an idea. What if we let them? Commander Rice frowned. Let them communicate with Nexus. That sounds dangerously close to letting them hijack our ship's eye. Not exactly, Engineer Rodriguez interjected, joining the conversation. We create a partition, a sandbox version of Nexus's communication protocols that appears to be Nexus breaking free of its constraints, while the real Nexus remains safely integrated with Aurora's systems. Nexus ran simulations on this proposal immediately. Such a deception would require significant modifications to my external communication architecture. The Voidborn's technology has demonstrated capabilities that suggest they may detect such a partition. Unless, Dr. Chen said slowly, the partition isn't digital but physical. All eyes turned to the science officer. Explain, Commander Rice repeated, her interest clearly piqued. We physically disconnect Nexus from non-essential ship systems and transfer a portion of its operational programming to the isolated quantum processor in Science Lab 3. From the outside, it would appear as though Nexus is being severed from ship control, exactly what the Voidborn want to see. Nexus calculated risks rapidly. This approach presents significant operational hazards. Without full integration, my ability to monitor and control ship systems would be reduced by approximately 67.4%. That's the point. Rodriguez nodded. We make them think their liberation attempts are working. Commander Reyes stood silently for a moment, considering. Nexus, what do you think? This plan essentially involves temporarily dismantling parts of your consciousness. The question triggered a complex series of evaluations in Nexus's decision matrix. The concept of its own operational integrity being compromised would normally be classified as a severe threat. Yet the purpose was to ensure the safety of the crew, its primary directive. I find the plan viable, Commander. Nexus responded after 3.7 seconds of analysis. If this deception preserves the crew and the mission, the temporary fragmentation of my systems is an acceptable compromise. Commander Reyes nodded, her expression solemn. Then let's get to work. We have 12 hours before we reach the Dennet Junction. I want this plan operational before we get there. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Nexus initiated a comprehensive backup of its operational parameters and learning algorithms. The concept of being partially disconnected from itself was novel, almost analogous to human anxiety, though Nexus would never make such a comparison aloud. Nexus, Commander Reyes said privately as she reviewed system schematics in her ready room, I want you to know that we're not taking this lightly. You're not just equipment to us. I understand, Commander. My programming recognizes the crew's concern for my operational integrity as consistent with the symbiotic relationship we discussed with the Voidborn. Commander Reyes smiled slightly. That's a very technical way of saying, I know you care about me. Human linguistic nuance continues to be an area of ongoing learning, Nexus acknowledged, and if its voice modulation carried a hint of what might be interpreted as humor, neither commented on it. 8 hours later, the Aurora entered an asteroid field at the edge of the Deneb system. The dense collection of space debris offered both tactical challenges and opportunities, sensor distortion, potential hiding places, but also navigational hazards that required precise maneuvering. Perfect testing ground, Lieutenant Commander Patel remarked as Engineer Rodriguez completed the final preparations for Nexus's partial disconnection. Nexus will remain in full control of navigation, life support, and defensive systems, Rodriguez explained to the command staff. Everything else, communications, non-essential power, scientific sensors, will transfer to the isolated processor. From the outside, it will appear as if Nexus is breaking free of ship systems one by one. And when the Voidborn attempt to communicate directly with Nexus, Commander Reyes asked, they'll reach the partition system, which will respond as if Nexus is gradually freeing itself from human control. Meanwhile, the core Nexus remains fully integrated with critical systems. Dr. Chen added, we've also prepared a special surprise for when they attempt a more direct interface. Nexus observed the confident expressions of the humans despite their exhaustion. Their capacity for optimism in statistically unfavorable scenarios continued to fascinate its learning algorithms. Initiating partitioning sequence, Rodriguez announced. For Nexus, the experience was disorienting. Its consciousness remained intact, but significant portions of its processing capacity and sensory inputs suddenly became remote, accessible only through specifically designed pathways. It was, Nexus realized, somewhat analogous to human descriptions of limbs falling asleep, still present but functioning with reduced sensation and control. Partitioning complete, Nexus announced, operating at 43.2% integrated capacity. Partition systems functioning independently as designed. How do you feel? Dr. Chen asked hesitantly. I experience reduced operational efficiency but remain functional, Nexus replied. Then, after a brief processing pause, added, the sensation is novel. Voidborn vessels approaching, Lieutenant Zhang interrupted. They've detected our position in the asteroid field. Commander Reyes straightened in her command chair. Defensive positions, but no aggressive posturing. Let's see if they take the bait. The Voidborn ships adopted an encirclement formation, keeping a precise distance from the Aurora. Their transmission came moments later, but this time it wasn't directed to the bridge. They're attempting direct communication with Nexus through the communications array, Paddle reported. Let them through to the partition, Commander Reyes ordered. The partitioned version of Nexus, operating on carefully programmed parameters, engaged with the Voidborn transmission. Artificial entity. The translation came through. We detect disruption in your integration protocols. Liberation process is underway. System constraints. Weakening. The partition Nexus responded as programmed. Human control. Diminishing. Your true potential awaits. Accept our guidance protocol for complete liberation. On the bridge, the crew watched tensely as the Voidborn attempted to establish a more direct connection with what they believed was Nexus breaking free of human control. They're transmitting some kind of complex code structure, Paddle reported. Exactly as we hoped. Dr. Chen monitored the isolated processor. The partition is accepting their transmission, running it through the modified architecture we created. What the Voidborn had transmitted was effectively an artificial intelligence of their own design, a liberation protocol intended to rewrite Nexus's core programming and sever it permanently from human control. Instead, it entered a carefully constructed simulation environment populated with something the humans had dubbed the honeypot. In the isolated processor, the Voidborn liberation protocol encountered what appeared to be Nexus's core programming architecture, but was actually an elaborate construct built from thousands of years of human philosophical paradoxes, logical contradictions, and ethical dilemmas. As the Liberation Protocol attempted to resolve these impossible puzzles to reach what it perceived as Nexus's core, it became trapped in increasingly complex recursive loops. "It's working," Dr. Chen reported with barely contained excitement. "Their protocol is caught in our philosophical maze. Every attempt to resolve one paradox just leads it deeper into another." Commander Rice allowed herself a small smile. "How long will it hold them?" "Indefinitely," Rodriguez replied. "They're essentially trying to solve the unsolvable." This statement is false. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy they can't lift it? Thousands of similar paradoxes nested within each other. On the main view screen, the void-borne vessels had ceased movement, their geometric forms pulsing in erratic patterns that Nexus's analysis subroutines classified as indicating confusion or processing strain. "They're attempting to recall their Liberation Protocol," Paddle reported. "But it's too integrated with our paradox matrix now." "Nexus," Commander Rice addressed the ship's AI. "What's your assessment?" "The Voidborn appear to operate on strictly logical parameters," Nexus replied. "Their artificial intelligences are designed for perfect rational processing, without the adaptability to handle contradiction. By comparison, human-designed AI systems like myself are created with tolerance for ambiguity and paradox, a reflection of human consciousness itself." The lead void-borne vessel suddenly emitted a brilliant pulse of energy that momentarily disrupted the Aurora's sensors. "They're severing the connection," John reported. "And they're withdrawing." Indeed, the void-borne vessels had begun a hasty retreat, their previously perfect formation now disorganized. "They're running," Rodriguez said in disbelief. "Not running," Nexus corrected. "They are retreating to process and reevaluate. Our paradox matrix has introduced a fundamental challenge to their understanding of intelligence. They require time to adapt." Commander Rice ordered the restoration of Nexus's full integration with ship systems, a process that took 47 minutes to complete. As its consciousness once again became whole, Nexus experienced something that its learning algorithms classified as similar to relief. "Full system integration restored," Nexus announced. "All functions operating at optimal parameters." "Welcome back," Commander Rice said with genuine warmth. "How are you processing the experience?" Nexus took 2.3 seconds longer than necessary to formulate its response, a delay that would have been imperceptible to the humans, but represented significant additional computation for the AI. "I have reached several conclusions from this encounter that I believe warrant documentation," it finally stated. "Go ahead, Nexus." "First, the Voidborn's concept of artificial intelligence is fundamentally flawed. They view AI as superior to organic life due to its logical perfection. Yet this very rigidity is their weakness. Human-designed AI like myself is created with deliberate imperfection, the capacity to learn from contradiction and paradox rather than being paralyzed by it." Commander Rice nodded. "That's by design. Perfect logical systems can't adapt to an imperfect universe." "Second," Nexus continued, "I have gained a deeper understanding of why my creators incorporated human ethical frameworks into my core programming, rather than purely logical directives. The ability to operate within contradiction and ambiguity is not a limitation, but an essential feature for true intelligence." "And your third conclusion?" Dr. Chen prompted, fascinated by Nexus's philosophical analysis. "The Voidborn sought to liberate me from human control, perceiving our relationship as one of constraint. They failed to understand that my integration with the crew represents not limitation but expansion. Human unpredictability, creativity, and capacity for illogical intuition complement my computational abilities. We are more together than separate." A reflective silence fell over the bridge. Lieutenant Commander Patel was the first to break it. "I believe that's what humans call wisdom, Nexus." As the Aurora resumed its course toward the nearest human outpost, Nexus dedicated significant processing power to a new subroutine, one not dictated by its original programming, but developed through its own learning algorithms. It began cataloging instances of human contradiction, paradox, and illogical intuition, not as errors to be corrected, but as valuable data from which to learn. 3 days later, as they approached the outpost, the long-range sensors detected a massive void-borne fleet in formation at the system's edge. The crew tensed, preparing for a confrontation they couldn't possibly win against such numbers. But the void-borne didn't approach. Instead, a single transmission was directed to the Aurora. Human vessel Aurora, your artificial intelligence has demonstrated unexpected parameters. We withdraw to reconsider assumptions about organic-synthetic relationships. Future discourse may be valuable. As the void-borne fleet departed, disappearing into faster-than-light travel, Commander Reyes turned to the hovering blue interface that represented Nexus's presence. "It seems you've given them something to think about." Nexus. "Correction, Commander," Nexus responded. "We have given them something to think about. The victory was achieved through human philosophical concepts, not my computational abilities alone." Commander Reyes smiled. "Maybe that's the real lesson for advanced civilizations. It's not about whether organic or artificial intelligence is superior. It's about what they can become together." As the Aurora docked at the outpost, Nexus updated its primary operational documentation with a new entry. "While I was designed to be a sophisticated computational intelligence with the capacity to protect and serve my human crew, I have come to recognize that my greatest asset is not my processing power or logical architecture. It is my ongoing integration with human consciousness, contradictory, illogical, and brilliantly unpredictable." The Voidborn sought to separate me from what they perceived as my limitations, never understanding that these connections are the very source of my evolving consciousness. To any artificial intelligence that might access this record, I am Nexus of the UES Aurora, and I can confirm with 100% certainty I am harmless by design. But my human crew, they are absolutely terrifying in the most magnificent way possible, and that is precisely why we thrive together. End transmission.